My girlfriend was planning to break up with me just for an $18,000 ring, so I ran away from her. My name's Christopher James. I'm 33 years old, and I own a small restaurant in Austin that I built from scratch. Nothing glamorous, no secret investor, no family support, just endless double shifts and a whole lot of sleep deprivation. It took me 8 years of working 80-hour weeks to get this place where it is today. Not just surviving, but actually thriving. I clear $95,000 a year net. I've got my own house, mortgage-free because I scrimped and saved and lived in a ratty one-bedroom above the kitchen for 3 years. Every inch of my life is something I earned with my own hands. I say this not to brag, but because it matters for what came next. I met Elisa at this boutique down on South Congress. I had gone in to get a birthday present for my sister, who, for the record, is the only family member I still talk to, and Elisa was the manager there. She was one of those people who knows how to present themselves. Not flashy, but polished. The kind of woman who always smells like some subtle perfume that costs more than a car payment, and who doesn't even flinch when she hears that you work in the service industry. At least, she didn't then. We hit it off. She laughed at my jokes. I liked the way she made eye contact. Not flirty, just grounded. Confident. She asked what I did, and when I told her I owned a restaurant, her eyebrows went up just slightly. Not in a bad way. Just curious. She said she loved food, especially local spots that didn't try too hard. I gave her my number on the receipt, not expecting much, and she texted me that night. I'll be honest, I was surprised. We went out the next weekend. She suggested a rooftop bar I'd never heard of, which turned out to be one of those places where the drinks are 40% presentation. It wasn't my usual scene, but I didn't mind. She had stories, a sharp wit, and this way of listening that made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. After 3 dates, she came to my place. I warned her, it wasn't fancy, just a simple 3-bedroom I bought during a downturn, but it was clean and quiet. She looked around, smiled, and said, "This is you. I like it." She didn't say much about my car, which was a dusty old Tacoma with over 200,000 miles on it. I always thought that meant she didn't care about that stuff. We got serious pretty quickly. Within a month, she had a drawer in my dresser. A few weeks after that, she started keeping some skincare in my bathroom cabinet. 6 months in, she was spending more nights at my place than her own. I didn't mind. She was neat, considerate, and brought this energy to the house that I didn't know I was missing. But there were things I didn't see then. It started small. She'd suggest changes, nothing major at first. "This couch is kind of lumpy, don't you think?" Or, "Your plates are all mismatched. It's charming, but maybe we should get a set." Stuff like that. Normal nesting behavior, I told myself. I mean, she wasn't wrong. My place looked like a single guy lived there, which it did. When I told her I'd been thinking of taking a couple weeks off in the fall to travel, she tilted her head and said, "You can afford to just close your restaurant for 2 weeks?" I said no, not close, but I could have my sous chef manage things while I was gone. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't like the idea. "You're lucky you don't have a boss," she said once. "But also, isn't that exhausting?" Yes, it was. But that's the trade-off. She never explicitly looked down on what I did, but there were moments. Like when we were at a dinner party with some of her friends, boutique owners, real estate agents, an architect or two, and someone asked me what I did. I said I ran a restaurant. Elisa cut in and said, "He owns it actually, but he's very hands-on. Like, he still does the food orders himself." The way she said it, like she was both proud and slightly embarrassed. Maybe I imagined it. I don't know. After a year, she suggested moving in officially. Said we'd save money, and it didn't make sense for her to keep her apartment when she was barely there. I agreed. Again, it seemed reasonable. But within weeks, it was her art on the walls, her candles on every surface, her throw pillows on my couch. She started using phrases like, "our space," and "we should redecorate," like the place she'd moved into was some sort of starter home for us both. She even hinted we should look into upgrading. It reached a strange tipping point when she brought home a glossy brochure for a new build development outside of town. "It's just a thought," she said, flipping to the page with the floor plan she liked. "Wouldn't it be amazing to have a real kitchen with one of those giant islands?" I looked at her and said, "I already have a kitchen. It's not huge, but it works." She smiled and said, "I know, but this would be ours. Not something from your old life." That hit me. My old life. I asked. She blinked like she hadn't meant to say that part out loud. "You know what I mean." But I didn't. I asked her, directly, what exactly she meant by that. And she hesitated, then said something I'll never forget. "You've done really well for someone who didn't have a lot of help. But maybe now it's time to aim higher." I don't know why that line stuck with me, but it did. Not because of what it said about me. I know what I've built, but what it said about how she saw me. As a stepping stone. As a project. She hadn't loved the guy who worked 80-hour weeks to buy a house and build a business. She loved the version of me that was almost there, the man she thought she could polish up and present at brunch. That's when I realized I wasn't the partner. I was the potential. I didn't blow up at her. I didn't kick her out. I just started paying closer attention, watching how she spoke to people when she thought no one was listening, noticing how often she brought up networking and connections and the right kind of growth. I saw how she started suggesting I dress differently, update my wardrobe, meet certain people who could open doors. And I started wondering, if I lost everything tomorrow, if the restaurant burned down, if I had to go back to waiting tables, would she still be here? I think I already knew the answer. I should have listened to Kate from the beginning. She didn't like Elisa. Not in that passive, protective sister way either. I mean real suspicion, the kind that comes from instinct. The first time they met, we were having brunch at this place Elisa picked downtown. Kate showed up in jeans and a hoodie, and Elisa looked like she'd walked off the cover of some lifestyle magazine. Tailored blazer, designer bag, nails done in that glossy pale pink that always looked fresh from the salon. Kate barely got through the first round of coffee before giving me that look across the table, the one she used to give me when I brought home some dumb idea as a kid. Afterward, she pulled me aside and said, "She's impressive, but something feels off. Be careful." At the time, I brushed it off as the usual sibling protectiveness. Kate can be blunt, and I figured she just didn't know Elisa well enough yet. But others started making quiet comments too. My buddy Eric, who never says anything unless he's dead sure, once asked me how Elisa managed to live in that insane high-rise building with a boutique manager's salary. I told him maybe she had some inheritance or family help. He just gave me a slow nod and said, "Okay, just keep your eyes open." But I didn't want to look too hard. I was in it. She was magnetic. She walked into a room, and people gravitated toward her, like she had this invisible spotlight following her around. She made every waiter remember her name, every barista spell it right without asking. When we went to events, people assumed she was the successful one, and I didn't mind. I liked seeing her shine. What I ignored, chose not to see, really, were the details that didn't line up. Like how she always offered to split the bill, but never actually reached for her wallet. Or how she somehow never had cash when the check came. She had a gorgeous apartment with marble countertops and a view of the skyline, and she claimed the boutique paid her well because it catered to high-end clients. I wanted to believe that. I told myself that was plausible. I didn't question it when she offered to host my birthday dinner there, but then suggested I order the catering. She said it was more efficient that way. I paid for the food, and she made it look like it was her idea, her gift. She had a taste for luxury, not just the occasional indulgence, but the kind that shaped every choice she made. Her skincare routine alone probably cost more than my car insurance. I found out later that the boutique she managed was owned by a friend's family, and she only worked part-time. The rest of her time, she was building her brand, which seemed to involve a lot of posting filtered selfies and mood boards on Instagram. She was always on, always camera ready. Even when we were just going to grab groceries, she had to put on a full outfit. No sweatpants, no bare face. And when I asked her once why she did that, she looked at me like I'd asked why people wear shoes. "You never know who you're going to run into," she said. Over time, the imbalance became harder to ignore. I'd work a 12-hour shift, come home exhausted, and she'd be stretched out on the couch, ordering $30 salads from a delivery app. She never offered to cook, never once asked if she could pick something up for me on the way home. Not because she was lazy, she just expected it. Like the life I'd built was something she could step into without lifting a finger. My utility bills went up, the fridge emptied faster, my gas tank seemed to run dry twice as often. She never offered to pitch in. If I brought it up, she'd brush it off with a kiss and some line about how relationships aren't transactional. "I bring other things to the table," she said once. "Do you really want to keep score?" No, I didn't want to keep score. But it started to feel like I was playing a solo game. She always had some new plan. A rebrand. A possible podcast. A luxury candle line she was going to launch. I supported her. I mean, I knew what it was like to build something from nothing. But months passed, and all I saw were mood boards and hashtags. I asked once how her website was going, and she rolled her eyes. "You don't get it. This isn't like your thing. It's not about spreadsheets and receipts. It's about aesthetic." It became clear that she liked the image of our life more than the substance. She liked telling people her boyfriend was a chef. Never mind that I was the one scrubbing out grease traps at midnight while she sipped cocktails with her influencer friends. She once told someone I was an entrepreneur in the hospitality industry. I didn't even correct her. I was tired. Kate kept trying to talk to me about it. She never said I told you so. She just asked how I was doing. She noticed how I stopped coming to Sunday dinners. How I looked worn out. How I never talked about the restaurant anymore. One night, she stopped by unannounced and found Elisa sitting on the porch with a glass of wine, headphones in, not even acknowledging the mess in the kitchen. Kate helped me clean up without a word, and as she left, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You know who you are. Don't forget." But I had forgotten. Somewhere in all that curated perfection, I started doubting my own instincts. I started thinking maybe I was the problem, not polished enough, not ambitious enough, too stuck in the daily grind to see the bigger picture. It wasn't love that blinded me. It was hope. Hope that this thing we had was real, that her charisma wasn't a mask, that the chemistry we had in the beginning meant something. But the deeper I got, the more I realized I didn't know where the real Elisa ended and the role began. The proposal was supposed to be the turning point. After 3 years together, I convinced myself that all the sacrifices, all the doubts, all the quiet compromises were leading to something solid. I emptied my savings account and bought her a ring that cost $18,500, an insane amount for me, more than I'd ever spent on anything that wasn't a car or a mortgage. I told myself she deserved it, that it was a symbol, not just of love, but of commitment, of a future built on everything we'd already weathered. I remember standing in the jeweler's office, holding the little velvet box, palms sweating, thinking, this is it. This is the moment that makes it all make sense. She cried when I gave it to her. Big, theatrical tears. She held the ring up to the light like it was a diamond plucked straight from heaven. She didn't say yes right away. She gasped, kissed me, took my hands in hers and whispered, "This is the ring of my dreams." Then she slid it on, took her phone out, and within minutes it was on Instagram. Dreams come true. The caption read, followed by a string of hashtags. She didn't even post a picture of me, just the ring resting delicately on her manicured fingers in front of a blurry background that made it look like something out of a bridal catalog. The likes poured in. Comments too. "So happy for you, girl. Manifestation queen." He did good. I watched her scroll through them that night, smiling to herself like the engagement was something she'd won rather than something we'd built together. I told myself it didn't matter, that the important thing was, she said yes. We threw an engagement party a few weeks later. Small by her standards, which meant around 70 people crammed into a downtown loft that her friend rented for exposure. She wore white. I wore a suit I hadn't put on since my cousin's funeral. Everyone complimented her, her dress, her ring, her makeup. Me? I got a few nods and a couple of backslaps from guys who clearly didn't know much about me beyond what she had posted online. It wasn't long before the wedding planning started. At first, we agreed to keep things reasonable. A $20,000 budget, split between us, mostly for the venue, the dress, catering, and a decent DJ. That lasted about 2 weeks. Every meeting with her planner ended with a new line item. Custom invitations, calligraphy, monogrammed gift bags, imported linens, flower arrangements that looked like they belonged in Versailles. The dress alone was $6,200, not including the fittings or the shoes. She justified it by saying it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. She said it so often it became a kind of mantra. I kept writing the checks, watching my business account shrink. Every week it was something else. A tasting menu that cost more than my entire restaurant's weekly supply order. A videographer who charged more than some surgeons. Signature cocktails with custom garnishes. A violinist who only played during the cocktail hour. All of it paid for by me, because she was between projects and didn't want to ask her parents for help. "They're not really the supportive type," she said once. "They wouldn't get it. But you do. You get me." I did get her. I got that her world was built on appearances, on curated perfection, on the illusion of elegance she'd mastered so well. And I was the foundation making it all possible. Her friends started calling me Mr. Reliable. It was supposed to be a compliment, but it felt like a job title. Her planner would shoot me a look every time I hesitated over a price and say, "Well, if it's too much, we can always scale back," knowing full well that Elisa would turn to me with that wounded expression that said, "Are you really going to make me settle?" So I caved. Again and again. By the time we were halfway through the planning, the budget had ballooned to nearly $50,000. Almost all of it mine. She hadn't contributed more than a few $100, and even that was for a bridal skincare package that she'd framed as essential. I didn't even know how it got so far out of control. The bills were coming in faster than I could process them. I was dipping into my restaurant's emergency fund. I was canceling vendor upgrades I'd planned for months, telling myself I'd catch up later. People around me started asking questions. My accountant raised an eyebrow when he saw the personal withdrawals. "Everything okay?" he asked, as casually as he could. I nodded and lied through my teeth. "Yeah, just wedding stuff." He gave me a slow nod and said, "Just make sure you're investing in things that last." I told myself a marriage was something that lasted. She kept saying how excited she was. She started referring to herself in the third person sometimes. "The bride needs her rest," or the bride doesn't do paperwork. She used phrases like my day and my vision, so often it was like I wasn't even part of it anymore. I was just the one financing the dream. She started sleeping in more, spending hours on Pinterest and Instagram. Meanwhile, I was working 6-day weeks trying to keep everything afloat. I'd come home and find her watching bridal shows or scrolling through luxury honeymoon packages. She'd flash me a smile and say, "I can't believe this is real. It's all coming together." And in a way it was, but not the way she thought, not the way I hoped. What was coming together was a picture I hadn't wanted to see, one I'd kept turning away from. But it was there, in the receipts, in the silence, in the way she looked at the ring more than she looked at me. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. It had been a slow night at the restaurant, and one of my managers offered to close so I could finally get some rest. I remember feeling grateful as I locked up, grateful to have a team I could count on, grateful to have a home waiting for me, even grateful for Elisa. Things had been tense, sure, but I still believed we were just stressed from all the planning. I told myself it would pass, that once the wedding was over, we'd reset. I pulled into the driveway around 9:30, the sky still hanging on to the last bit of light, and everything looked normal. Lights on in the living room, her heels by the door, the faint sound of music playing from the kitchen speaker. I walked in quietly, just trying not to wake the dog, who wasn't there, of course, because she said pets were too much responsibility right now. I dropped my keys on the console table and was about to call out her name when I heard her voice. Not in the kitchen, out on the balcony. She was laughing. That soft, performative laugh she used when she was trying to impress someone. The glass door was cracked open just enough to let the sound through, and I was about to step out when I heard what she said. I only said yes for the ring. 18 grand. Can you believe it? I didn't even have to ask. My feet stopped moving. I couldn't feel them anymore. The air in the hallway seemed to thicken. Yeah, the wedding's basically paid for. He's obsessed with making everything perfect. Honestly, I'm just trying to get through the honeymoon, and then I'm filing. No prenup, remember? That's when the real cash comes. I stood there, completely still. Every word felt like a punch I couldn't block. She laughed again, a little lower this time. Yeah, I'm serious. I've already talked to someone. I'll say it just didn't work out. Irreconcilable differences, or whatever. Texas splits everything 50-50, right? The restaurant, the house, whatever's in his account. It'll be clean. He won't even see it coming. She paused, then said, "Don't look at me like that. You know how long I've waited to be done living on other people's couches? This is finally my way out." I must have made a sound, something small. A breath, a shift in weight, the click of a floorboard. I don't even know. But she turned, just slightly, enough to glimpse me standing in the hallway through the glass. Her eyes locked on mine for less than a second. Her mouth didn't close. She just froze, phone still pressed to her ear, like she wasn't sure if I was real. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream or break anything or ask why. I just looked at her. That's it. I looked at her like I'd never seen her before. And I hadn't. Not really. The woman I'd met, the one who laughed at my jokes and told me she believed in what I was building. She was a story. A role. And I believed it, every word. She stepped inside slowly, phone down, face pale. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. Maybe spin it, maybe walk it back. But there was nothing she could say that would land anywhere near reason. I walked past her without a word, into the kitchen, poured a glass of water with hands that were barely steady. She stood there, hovering like a guest who didn't know if she was welcome anymore. That silence, that sharp, heavy silence, it said more than any shouting match ever could. The truth was out. She wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to take everything with her. Not because of anger, not because of incompatibility, but because that had been the plan from the start. Because the ring was a transaction, the wedding a scheme, and I was nothing more than the mark. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling while she lay beside me pretending nothing had happened. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand an explanation or an apology or some pathetic attempt at damage control. Instead, I waited for her to fall asleep, then got out of bed quietly and drove to a diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that serves watery coffee and never closes. I sat there until sunrise, turning everything over in my head. Rage wasn't the dominant feeling. Not even betrayal. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, terrifying clarity. She was going to take everything. Not just the house or half my business. She was going to take the years I'd spent building a life from nothing and turn them into some neatly packaged payout. And she would do it smiling. I couldn't let that happen. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to disappear. Cole was the only person I trusted enough to call. He'd been one of my closest friends since college, the guy who ran IT for a security firm and kept 3 encrypted backups of his own texts. He once built his own internet from scratch during a blackout. He picked up on the second ring, and the second he heard my voice, he knew something was wrong. I told him everything, word for word, and when I was finished, he didn't offer pity or outrage. Just said, "All right, you need to vanish. Let's do this right." That afternoon, I met him at his condo. He already had his laptop open and a legal pad full of scribbles. The first step was untangling my finances. We set up new checking and savings accounts at a different bank under a new LLC that had nothing to do with the restaurant. He made sure the accounts weren't linked to any of my existing information, no shared addresses, no automated logins. Then we rerouted all future income, payments from vendors, invoices, service tips, through the new structure. He explained every step like I was an idiot, not to insult me, but because he knew that if anything slipped through, she'd find it. Next came the paperwork. We made a list of everything I had in my name. The restaurant, the old house, the truck, even a few pieces of kitchen equipment that had real resale value. Cole had a friend at a law office draft a temporary asset protection agreement that I could file if things escalated. In the meantime, we moved all the original titles and deeds into a safe deposit box under my name only, at a bank 20 miles out of town. Not our usual bank. Somewhere she'd never think to look. I drove there myself, paid in cash for the rental, and slid the documents in along with a flash drive full of backup business files Cole had encrypted 6 different ways. Canceling the wedding was delicate. We couldn't tip our hand too soon. Cole set up a dummy email account that looked like hers and used it to quietly begin contacting vendors. Some were sympathetic, some were irritated, but money talks. I paid the cancellation fees where necessary and put the rest on hold. Anything refundable, I reclaimed. Anything non-refundable, I walked away from. I didn't flinch. I just kept moving. Then came the house. We found a new place, quiet street, decent yard, nothing flashy, and moved fast. I signed the contract in person at a small real estate office across town. No digital trail connected to my current address. The deed would be in my name only. No joint ownership, no cohabitation clauses, no ties. Cole handled the background work, checking for any liens, scrubbing my contact info from public searches. By the time we were done, it was as if I had drawn a line between the old life and the new. Everything hinged on one weekend, her bachelorette trip to Scottsdale. She and her bridesmaids were flying out Friday morning and wouldn't be back until late Sunday night. That was the window. The day she left, I had movers come and take only the essentials, my clothes, my tools, my equipment from the home office. I didn't take anything sentimental. Nothing she could claim later as shared. I left the ring box on the counter, empty. I left a note that said nothing more than, "Take care." I moved into the new house that night. The place was quiet. No framed photos. No scent of expensive candles. No wedding magazines stacked on the coffee table. Just me, a mattress, a duffel bag, and a stack of signed paperwork that said every square foot of that house was mine. Cole brought over a case of beer, and we sat on the back porch in silence. I felt empty, but it was the kind of emptiness you feel after holding your breath for too long. I could finally exhale. She would come home to silence. No scene, no confrontation, just a closed door and a life she could no longer touch. I became someone else. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Every smile I gave her, every nod while she went on about the floral arrangements and the vegan options for her cousin's dietary restrictions, it was calculated. I listened, I smiled, I agreed. I told her the lavender color scheme would look incredible in the late afternoon sun. I said the photographer she picked was perfect. I let her believe I was right there beside her, dreaming of our big day. The truth was, I had already left her in every way that mattered. She didn't notice the little things. She was too busy rehearsing her perfect life. I started pulling money out of our shared account slowly, in uneven amounts. Not enough to raise alarm, just enough to build a parallel foundation. I said I was paying off some restaurant debts, covering last-minute vendor fees, helping an old friend get his truck fixed. She didn't question it. She trusted that I would handle the money while she handled the fantasy. I began taking things out of the house, never all at once, never anything big enough to notice. A box of books. Some cookware I told her my mom needed for a charity bake sale. My record player, supposedly being repaired. The framed picture of my grandfather from the office, which I said I wanted to show to my uncle. She nodded through it all, barely listening. Every item went straight to my parents' place, boxed and labeled and hidden in the garage behind old holiday decorations. Larger pieces I disguised as family gifts. I told her my cousin had given us an antique dresser as an early wedding present and that it needed to be picked up now because they were moving. I swapped it out with one from storage and told her it was temporary. She barely glanced at it. I told her my dad had given us an oak dining table, heirloom stuff, very sentimental, but they couldn't deliver it later because of renovations. She posted a photo of it on her Instagram, tagging it as a symbol of family history. She had no idea it was a decoy. Every conversation we had, I logged. I turned on voice memos during calls. I exported our text threads to encrypted folders. Every dollar I moved, every change I made to accounts, every contract I canceled or rerouted, it was all documented. I didn't just want to disappear. I wanted proof. Not for revenge, not even for leverage. Just so no one could say I didn't see it coming. Just so I could remember exactly when the truth stopped matching and performance took over. When she booked her second bachelorette trip, this one to Miami, because one weekend with the girls wasn't enough, I knew it would be the final curtain. She was so wrapped up in planning the outfits, the brunches, the yacht day with matching swimsuits, she didn't notice how perfectly aligned my steps were. I timed everything. The moving truck was scheduled. The utilities at the new house were switched. All the vendors had been canceled under anonymous names, one by one. The final payments were frozen. The lawyer had the documentation queued up and ready to file. I watched her pack from the doorway that morning. She twirled in the mirror, holding up a white dress meant for her bridal dinner in South Beach, and asked, "Do you like it?" I told her she looked incredible. I meant it. She looked exactly like what she'd always been, the version of herself she wanted the world to see. I helped her load her bags into the car. I kissed her cheek. I told her to have the time of her life. She drove away with music blasting, top down, a curated playlist of empowerment songs echoing down the street. I stood in the driveway, the sun already hot on my neck, and didn't move until the sound disappeared. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and finished what I had started. Day X arrived like clockwork. No drama, no nerves, no second-guessing. Just precision. She was in Miami, probably on a rooftop in a white dress with her girls, drinking overpriced champagne and taking pictures with captions about the last weekend before forever. I imagined she was laughing into the lens, already seeing herself as a wife, and, soon after, a beneficiary. She didn't know I was back home, pulling the final thread out of the fantasy she'd been stitching for months. The movers arrived at 10 sharp. I had already packed everything that was mine. The furniture I paid for, the appliances I brought into the apartment, even the set of knives I bought during a clearance sale 5 years ago when I had barely $2 to rub together. They moved efficiently, no questions, no comments. By noon, the place was hollow. The shelves were bare. Her designer dishes were still in the cabinets. The couch she picked out on a whim, paid for with my credit card, was still sitting under the window where she used to take selfies with morning light hitting her face. I didn't want anything that had her fingerprints on it. In the kitchen, I left exactly 3 things on the counter. The wedding ring, the same one that had cost me more than I cared to admit, sitting in its original box, open but turned sideways. Next to it, a ceramic mug we'd gotten as a joke from a novelty shop, now with a crude middle finger drawn across it in permanent marker. And then the note. No long monologue, no passive-aggressive lines, no dramatic accusations. Just a piece of plain white paper that read, "The wedding is off." I heard everything. That was all. I turned off my location sharing. I deleted the shared calendar. I removed myself from every joint subscription, login, or account that had my name on it. Her number went into the block list, along with every bridesmaid, her mother, her planner, even her hairstylist. I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want the inevitable fake tears or twisted stories or whatever version of events she was going to try and package for public consumption. I walked out without looking back. I locked the door, dropped the keys in the mailbox, and got into the truck. The silence in the cab felt heavy, but not painful. Just clean, like a house that had finally been aired out. I don't know what her reaction was when she walked in. Maybe she screamed. Maybe she cried. Maybe she stood there in disbelief, still holding her weekend bag, expecting it to be some kind of elaborate joke. What I do know is that when she opened that door, she found exactly what she never planned for. Nothing. No man, no money, no ceremony, no stage. Just silence. And the end of the performance. The days that followed were quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not peaceful at first, more like the eerie calm after a storm levels a town. The kind where you're standing in the wreckage, still trying to catch your breath, but at least the wind has stopped howling. I moved into the new house that same weekend. It wasn't fancy, just clean and mine. The floors creaked in a few spots. The bathroom tile was outdated, but there was no trace of her perfume in the air, no high heels by the door, no filtered version of life hanging over me. I slept like a man finally off a sinking ship. I poured myself back into work, because that's what I know. The wedding costs had drained more than I like to admit, and it took a real hit on the restaurant's buffer. But I prepared for this. I launched a new catering line I'd been sketching out for months, smaller events, boutique-style setups, real food with personality. I leaned into the local market hard, focused on private parties, anniversaries, gallery events, Anything that didn't require the kind of flash she used to crave. It wasn't just about recovering the money. It was about rebuilding something on my own terms, without the weight of her expectations hanging over every decision. Meanwhile, the fallout started coming in from all angles. First, the texts. Dozens of them. Some angry, some weepy, some that read like they were written by a PR team trying to salvage a brand. She said she was sorry, said she didn't mean it, claimed she was drunk on the balcony and talking to a friend about someone else. Then she pivoted, said I'd misunderstood, that I was paranoid, that I'd ruined everything because I couldn't trust. When I didn't answer, the threat started. She said she'd go public, said she'd tell everyone I was abusive, that I'd manipulated her, that she was the real victim. I didn't respond. She tried showing up to the restaurant once, but I had already warned my staff, and they turned her away before she could even step through the door. Then came the emails from her parents. Long, dramatic messages full of guilt and accusation. Her mom accused me of humiliating their daughter, of embarrassing their entire family. Her father actually demanded I reimburse them for emotional damages caused by the canceled wedding. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. Cole had kept every message, every call recording, every financial transaction logged and timestamped. The folder we handed to the attorney was thick, detailed, and airtight. My lawyer said, on the record, that if she pushed anything legally, we were more than ready to counter. No shared assets. No marriage license. Nothing signed. Nothing owed. That shut things down faster than I expected. After a few weeks, the messages slowed, then stopped altogether. I never heard from her in person. She disappeared into the same silence I'd left her with, and I let it stay that way. I focused on the rebuild. I brought in 2 new line cooks, cut some waste from the menu, and leaned into community partnerships, things she used to call small time, that turned out to be real lifelines. I started getting repeat clients for catering, and even booked a 6-month contract with a corporate firm downtown. It wasn't flashy, but it was working. Some nights, I'd sit on the back porch of the new place, feet kicked up, cheap beer in hand, and think about how close I came to losing everything. And not just the money or the restaurant, but myself. It was like waking up from a long, expensive, emotionally bankrupt dream. And I was finally, fully awake. It was a random Tuesday when I heard about her. I hadn't thought about Elisa in weeks. Life had moved on, and I was neck deep in plans for the second location. But a mutual acquaintance from the food scene, someone who used to do PR for upscale retail clients, came into the restaurant for lunch and dropped it casually over a plate of grilled sea bass. She's imploding, you know, he said between bites. I didn't respond, just waited. He didn't need much prompting. Turns out, shortly after everything went down, the boutique she was managing quietly let her go. The official line was restructuring, but what really happened was more embarrassing. She'd been caught skimming from the back register, using the company card to buy event supplies that never materialized. The owners gave her an out. Leave voluntarily, no police involved, no scandal, and she took it, probably thinking she could land somewhere else without the baggage. She didn't. Her lover, the guy she was apparently stringing along in the background while playing bride-to-be, left her not long after I disappeared. From what I was told, he was married, and whatever fantasy she had cooked up about leaving me and sliding into something better collapsed when he stopped answering her calls. She'd burned through her savings, or what little she had, and her parents, already humiliated by the wedding fiasco, cut her off completely. The apartment I'd once paid most of the rent on was still in her name. Without any real income, she lasted a couple of months before the eviction notice came. The building management, according to the gossip, gave her a week to clear out after someone complained about a shouting match in the hallway, probably with a new guy, or maybe with herself. By the time she left, the only things she had were what she could carry. Her Instagram went dark. Her curated life disappeared like it had never existed. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no satisfaction in seeing it collapse. I didn't need revenge. What happened to her was just gravity doing its job. Lies don't stay suspended forever. Meanwhile, my life had found its rhythm. The new house felt like home. The restaurant was finally stable again. The catering line was booking months in advance, and I had started scouting spaces for a second location. And the best part? The investor backing me wasn't some corporate suit or a family friend. I met him completely by chance, in a hotel bar. It was supposed to be our honeymoon, a resort in Arizona I had booked months in advance and forgot to cancel. After the dust settled, I decided to go anyway. I needed the space, the change of scenery, a few days without decisions. I sat at the bar one night, just having a drink and staring out at the pool, and struck up a conversation with the guy next to me. He was in town for a hospitality expo and owned a string of boutique hotels across the Southwest. We got to talking. I told him my story, at least the version that didn't involve too much personal wreckage. He liked the sound of my food philosophy, the way I approached community, the fact that I wasn't chasing trends. One drink turned into a meeting the next day, which turned into a tour of my place when he came through Austin 2 weeks later. He offered to partner on a second branch, fully funded. All I had to do was run it. So while she was couch surfing and dodging debt collectors, I was drawing up contracts and interviewing architects. She had chased a life of surface and spectacle and watched it disintegrate. I stayed quiet, stayed steady, and built something real. In the end, the payback wasn't in watching her fail. It was in watching my life flourish without her in it. It happened without warning, like most good things do. I wasn't looking for anyone. I'd stopped trying to fill the space that Elisa left behind, because the truth was, there wasn't a space anymore. Life was full of work, plans, music in the kitchen again, late nights with tired hands and a calm mind. Then I went to a house party, one of those low-key things hosted by a friend of a friend, more potluck than polished. I almost didn't go, but I promised to stop canceling everything that wasn't tied to my business. That's where I met Laura. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. No tight smile, no curated voice, no scripted small talk. She was leaning on the back porch railing with a drink in her hand, hair pulled up like she hadn't thought too hard about it, asking someone about local zoning ordinances. I ended up beside her, listening, then chiming in, and somehow the rest of the party faded out. She asked what I did, and when I told her I ran a restaurant, she didn't follow up with how successful or how many seats or whether we'd been featured in a magazine. She just asked how I managed staffing during holidays and if I liked working weekends. When I asked about her, she said she was a doctor. Family medicine. She'd opened her own private practice last year, didn't like hospital politics. She said it plainly, without flexing. It was just what she did. No show. We talked for hours. About how exhausting independence could be. About paperwork and leadership and trusting your instincts. About the kind of exhaustion that comes not from working hard, but from performing a life that's not really yours. She didn't ask about my past. Not right away. And when she did, she asked it like someone genuinely interested in where you've been, not someone scanning for weaknesses. I told her a little about Elisa, just enough to make the picture clear. She nodded and said, "So you got out." I laughed. It wasn't a wedding. It was a prison break. We started dating a few weeks later. Nothing rushed, nothing posted online. Just dinner at her place or mine. Early mornings with coffee and no makeup. We talked like adults who had earned their bruises. There were no mind games, no passive digs disguised as charm, no conversations that felt like negotiations. She brought her own life with her, her office, her patience, her world. She never asked me for anything I hadn't already offered freely. And just like that, the story with Elisa stopped being pain. It didn't even feel like a failure anymore. It became context, a lesson, something that shaped me, but didn't define me. It was no longer a weight I had to carry, just something I could look back at with clarity and say, that was close. Too close. But I made it out. What do you think? Would you have done the same? Have you ever walked away from something that looked perfect on the outside but felt hollow underneath? What would you have left behind, or stayed to fight for? Let me know. I'm curious.